Well, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you're having a great day. Good to have you on with us today. We appreciate it. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to say hello to a few folks and then we'll get right into our session today. Kevin from Oshawa. Indeed. Hello, Andrea. Niagara Falls. Jen. Cape Breton, Jeanette from our staff, Rosa, and Guylaine from Hearst, and Betty Lynn, Carol, Keswick, New Brunswick, Keswick Ridge, Edith, John, Wyoming, Rita, New Brunswick, Nativity, and Wendy from Markham, Georgie, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Beverly, Newfoundland, Sue, Sudbury, never heard of it, Catherine, Parksville, British Columbia, Fran from Orangeville, Serpa, says it's going to get cold, and Tina, Nova Scotia, Crystal, Alliston, Donna, Park Hill, Lynn, Halifax, Nova Scotia, Sue from St. Petersburg, Florida. And Jan is watching in Texas. Nick from our staff. Eric, Ottawa, Helen, Cornwall, Bruno, North Bay, Janet, Thunder Bay. Another Wendy from London. Denise, North Bay, Snowy. Diane, Ottawa, Melanie, New York, and Dave, Muskoka, William, Markham, Cole, Salut de Sudbury, or Colette, it's probably Colette, Yolande, how are you? Nicole, Beverly, Rainy, South Carolina, Sandra, Leela, in Sudbury. Diane from North Bay, Sandy, Chilliwack, British Columbia, Bonnie, how are you? And how do you say that? Catricia, how are you? Jocelyn, Lucy, and Lynn, in Barrie, Frida. You're in the Caribbean there. You get Hearst, minus 37. Yikes. Rebecca, Jeanette from Kapuskasing, Luella from West Tennessee. Okay, let's get going. Couple of little headlines here today, okay? And I actually gonna maybe answer a few questions that came out last week, and I forgot. Well, I didn't forget. First of all, I didn't finish last Friday because we had a lot of questions, and I guess I was pontificating on other things. And secondly, I meant to do it to answer the questions I didn't earlier this week, and I must admit that it slipped my mind. Obesity rates quadrupled in 1980 to now. What happened? Okay. Why have obesity rates tripled? Well, I'm going to tell you why. They changed the sugar. Okay? They changed the sugar. They went from, a glucose, a sucrose, and they went to a fructose. Not a good idea. It sounded good. High fructose corn syrup. And remember, the syrup, there's a couple of things. Fructose heads to the liver. Liquid, okay, they liquefy it, high fructose corn syrup. And the reason it's because it crystallizes very well. You can put it in food, you can add it to everything. It's very inexpensive. It is very, very addictive. one of the most addictive sugars ever. The food industry knew exactly what they were doing, and they hooked us. And the result of that is a quadrupling of obesity rates. So that's the story since 1980, quadrupled. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. You just need to use your eyeballs, walk around in a mall, wherever you go. What do we see, right? We see the obesity rates skyrocketing. Now listen, that's not all that is skyrocketed. Non-alcoholic fatty liver, when they changed that sugar and they went to high fructose corn syrup, one of the worst things that they could have ever done in terms of our health, not for their pocketbook, but for our health, because of that direct line to the liver. And the liver is a parking lot. That's the way I like to look at it. It's only got so many room for so many spaces. I call it the Costco parking lot. Tony Jr. likes the minivan. You pack it up, go on a holiday, and you're out of room. And, okay, let's talk about this just for a second. Let's break this down. The side effects. We talked about obesity. We've talked about non-alcoholic fatty liver. Epidemics today. 40 quadrupled in obesity. Let me tell you something. Non-alcoholic fatty liver was unheard of before 1980. I mean, it was so rare, it was incredible. Okay? And then, if you draw a line from 1980 and you look, and what do we have? We have an explosion of diabetes. I call it diabesity. Okay? Diabesity. We have an explosion because you can't have non-alcoholic fatty liver and not get the ramifications of that liver being stuffed up. We've talked about this a gazillion times. When the liver is stuffed up, its response is to make triglycerides. And your triglycerides go through the roof. And your HDL, your cholesterol, goes down. And now you've made yourself, or put someone in that position, is in a very high likelihood of having heart disease. It's not cholesterol. Well, okay, it is, but it's not high cholesterol, it's low cholesterol. It's not high cholesterol. It's triglycerides and your HDL will go over and over and over and over again. And so, you know, what happens in the liver, it's not Las Vegas. It doesn't stay in the liver. It's now off into the bloodstream. And you're damaging your blood vessels with these fat balls. Never mind, and the inflammation that affects the endothelium. That's your Teflon layer of your blood vessels. Inflammation over a period of time will damage that. It will plaque it up. And then we have the effect on the brain. We've talked about this a lot. When the liver, you have trouble with insulin, you have insulin resistance, the brain is very much affected by that. That sugar, high fructose corn syrup, is very destructive to the brain. Very destructive. And see, the problem with high fructose corn syrup, okay? Not only that it's fructose, headed off into the liver, but your brain, look, your brain is the federal government. Your brain is headquarters, okay? Think about it that way. So it doesn't matter what you eat. Your brain says, hey, you owe me from that food. Your brain is an energy crazy machine. And it takes your food and it takes what you, every time you breathe, oxygen. Okay? Your brain needs oxygen, you knew that. And your brain needs food. And what happens in the brain is that, especially your little mitochondria in the brain, it produces ATP. And it wants the first fruits. You know what I mean? It wants it. So look, if people insist on giving it high fructose corn syrup, your brain says, okay. Problem with that is it produces a very rapid response of ATP. ATP has a lot of how can I say it? You're using oxygen and digested food. High fructose corn syrup takes a beeline to your brain, and because of that, you have a lot of debris. You have carbon dioxide, and you have oxygen free radicals. And the brain is really saturated with these free radicals when people make the wrong choices. This is why I always want you guys to think of eggs, meat, and cheese. Why is that? It's a much better fuel for your brain. You're not going to have the debris. Now, we talk about this quite a bit too. Your brain has its own self-cleaning oven. Okay? You got a self-cleaning oven at home? Okay? Well, your brain's got a self-cleaning oven. It's called your glial cells, your lymphatic system. So when you eat eggs, meat, cheese, you don't have a lot of debris. So you're not creating all these free radicals. You're going to have a few, but you're not having lots of them. I was reading something in a book recently. Your brain goes through nearly 6 kilograms of ATP per day. Holy moly. But much less if you're eating eggs, meat, and cheese. But if you, when I say you know I don't mean you, but if folks insist on giving the brain the wrong fuel, and the worst is high fructose corn syrup. Addictive, it takes a root in the brain, the same as cocaine. Do you think the food industry didn't know what they were doing? But I don't think they ever thought it would be that destructive. I really don't. I give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, so we're hooking you on sugar. So what? They had no idea, and they should have, how toxic sugar is, and especially high fructose corn syrup. And so what do we see today? Here's the stats. Obesity rates since 1980, and by the way, that's when high fructose corn syrup was created. In I think it was 1982, if I'm not mistaken on that. Okay? So I just thought I'd mention that. Brain energy. liver damage, blood vessel damage. And folks, someone that's obese, their cancer rates go through the roof compared to a normal weight person. It's the way it is. Cancer's up, cardiovascular disease is up, Alzheimer's is up, and obviously diabetes. Obviously diabetes. Okay, thought I would bring that to you. Okay, bad news on antibiotics. We talked about it earlier this week, but I just want to give you a little bit more. This was an article that came out recently. Listen to this. 30 to 50% of antibiotic use is unnecessary. 30 to 50%. Listen to this one. 20% of emergency room visits are due to the side effects of antibiotic. 20%. 2 million, let me just read this right. 2 million people get infected a year with bacterial resistant, okay, like superbugs. 2 million people in the United States alone. 23,000 of them die from that infection because antibiotics are not working. They go into sepsis. 30 to 60% of antibiotics in intensive care are unnecessary. They use them, and I understand why they use them. We don't want any chance of infection, so they use antibiotics, but when they're not necessarily, you're creating these super bugs, okay? Center for Disease Control estimates by the year 2050, okay? 2050, the cost of antibiotic resistant bacteria will be around $100 trillion. Bad news on antibiotics. They can save your life, but we got to get a hold of antibiotics and use them properly. It's not like doctors don't get the memo on that. I remember even in Ontario, the College of Physicians and Surgeons put out a memo. This is 15 years ago, maybe even 20. I remember I reported it on my radio show back in those days, and they send out an edict saying, look, you guys, doctors, stop giving antibiotics for colds. If it's viral, leave it alone. Don't give them an antibiotic. But it's been hard to get their attention. And I mentioned this last week, that pharmacists should never, ever, ever let you leave the pharmacy with an antibiotic without a probiotic, saying, you know what, you need to take a probiotic with this. And we talked all about that last week, okay? So just wanted to give you an update on those couple of stories. Let me get to a couple of questions that were asked. Yvonne asked a good question. My vitamin D does not have K2. Why not? Yvonne, why not? Oh, that's all right, okay? Our vitamin D does have K2, but Yvonne's doesn't, okay? And you're asking me, if I take a couple of slices of cheese, will that be good enough to get the K2? Well, yes. I love cheese. K2 is such an important vitamin. I'm telling you guys, it's amazing to me. It's another reason why you want to live primarily, not exclusively, primarily on animal-based products. Vitamin K2, hello, is only found in the animal kingdom. What does vitamin K2 do? Well, vitamin K2 takes calcium and puts it into your bones and teeth where they belong. That's where calcium belongs. Calcium doesn't belong in your bloodstream. You don't want calcium in your bloodstream, and you don't want sugar in your bloodstream. That's why I love cheese. Guys, do you think I'm crazy? I know some of you probably do. But do you think when I say, I'm sorry, and sometimes I have to get into a dispute, even online, even on our Facebook, with people, because, you need moderation. No, you don't. Look, guys, I'm not telling you not to eat vegetables. I'm not telling you not to have some fruit. I'm not. But if you want vitamin K2, Yvonne, you're right. Got to have some cheese or butter or steak or eggs. That's where vitamin K2 is found. Why do you think I talk about that all the time? I don't do that just for fun, although it is fun. Okay? Melissa was asking, would a type 1 diabetic always have high A1C? Well, they're certainly going to be much more subject to high A1C, but not necessarily always, depending on how their insulin is working. Remember, type 1 is different. Remember, we talked about this yesterday, what they used to call diabetes? Type 2 diabetes. It's type 2 now. And then they changed it to type 2 adult onset diabetes. Well, it used to be called sugar diabetes. And type 1 is autoimmune. Pancreas is not working properly. So they pretty well are going to have, look, you don't, you try and get their A1C down because that's an average. And, depending on how their insulin is functioning, the medication, but listen, let me say this, Melissa. Type 1, type 2, type 3, Alzheimer's. You need eggs, meat, and cheese. The best thing for any type of diabetic is protein and fat. Fat and protein together. Not carbs, okay? Not carbs, and certainly not fat and carbs. But the best food is protein and fat. And God put the two of them together. That's why they taste so good. Okay. And Rick says, I'm on the reset 3 weeks. 3 weeks, my sugar is going up. Rick, I think maybe I answered this. I already called you weird, didn't I? You're not doing anything wrong, Rick. First of all, I'm not that big on taking your blood sugar all the time, okay? Like, I know people do it and we're encouraged to do it. That's the pharmaceutical industry that makes a lot of money on those, those meters. I used to tell my patients, would you stop? Stop checking all the time. You're driving me crazy. And you're going to drive yourself crazy. How are you feeling? I feel good, doc. Well, that's a good sign. Okay? And I know especially when you're type 1, you have to monitor your sugar more regularly. I get that. Okay? But you know what? Like, don't overdo it. And Rick, don't worry about it. Okay? Because it's just, okay. I think I want to do one more. My husband, I know I did that last week. Okay, I think I pretty well, hold on, let me get to the bottom. I always go, varicose veins. Anna was asking about varicose veins. Well, look, varicose veins usually is microcirculation, okay? Have a baby, get varicose veins, and, the valves don't, they're not pumping up like they used to and opening. I like Navital for it. And, okay, that's what happens. Extra weight too can be hard on that. Diane, why are we allowed coconut milk on the reset? Because you're a bunch of babies. I just tease. Okay. Why are you allowed coconut milk? Okay, I know it's a fruit. Okay, so coconut is a fruit. And you're saying, why are you allowing that? Well, because some of you can't have cream in your smoothie. But I only want you to have coconut milk in a Dr. Martin's Perfect smoothie if you can't take cream. Okay? So I allow you to substitute with some coconut milk. Okay? I'm just being a nice guy. That's all it is. But coconut milk is actually, I don't mind it. It's actually pretty good. Okay, Brenda, why would an 80-year-old have such dry eyes when they wake up especially? Well, 80 years old or 60 years old or 40 years old, when you got dry eyes, you're low in lubrication. Dry eyes is low DHA. You need DHA, I'm telling you. And when that gets low, your eyeballs are gonna dry out. Okay, Celine. Okay, a couple of people asked about apple cider vinegar and does it count as water if I add it to my water daily? Well, look, when you do it, it counts as your water. But it's not going to take that direct route. So if you add apple cider, I like apple cider vinegar, okay? I do. I like it. It's good for you. So you can certainly have it. You can have it on the reset. It's good for your acidity in your stomach. I like that. I like balsamic vinegar too. Okay, I do. It's a little bit sweeter, but it's good for you. I like it. Okay, I like those vinegars, and they help with your blood sugar too, and they help with your A1C. Okay. Okay. What else were you asking about that? Does lemon in the water count for day as water? Yeah, lemon in the water. Yeah, if you want to put some lemon in, I got no problem with that. Okay, that counts for your water. And the process of absorption is asking, this is Celine. Look, it's different. Because whenever there's something in water, lemon, probably not very much. It'll take a pretty well direct route to your gut. But you don't want anything in your water that has to be processed. Okay, that's why tea, which is what, 99% water, coffee, 95% water. Coffee's good, but it's not water because it's processed differently. You want water as hydration, a little bit of lemon, apple cider, that's not going to bother you. And you certainly don't need insulin for it, okay? You need no insulin at all. Okay, Giselle, I wonder if I do the reset with lots of saturated fat, will I flush out gallbladder stones? I'd be careful with it, okay? I'd be careful with it because your gallbladder, it's a use it or lose it type of thing. And then if you just start using it to flush out the stones, I'd go easy on the fat to start off with the saturated fat. Okay? I think I answered all the questions. Okay, guys. Have I told you recently that I love you? Yesterday? Oh, okay. Well, I mean it. You know what tomorrow is? Question and Answer Friday. Okay, guys, we love you. Talk to you soon.